Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Slight confession to make. I had actually planned initially on possibly sort of running it as a mock Seder and actually, putting on my kittel and setting out the Korah and everything. But L'Shana Haba, Is Hashem, in Yerushalayim. So what we're going to try and do this evening in Is Hashem, is take you through chronologically the Seder of the Seder from the perspective of the Halachos, because it's important that we get things right, and also, time permitting, possibly share some ideas with you as well, some insights into the Haggadah. And I'd like to start actually with a Zohar Kiddush. In some Haggadahs, it's printed in the at the beginning. Where is it? I had it a minute ago. Here it is. So I'll quickly read and translate the Zohar. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I want to set the scene in terms of the stakes are high. What do I mean by that? The Seder night is an avodah. It is a fascinating mixture of a night that is both serious and solemn, but also, as we shall discover, there is simcha here as well. And indeed, the simcha also finds halachic expression. Normally on a Leil Yom Tov, there's no din simcha. But given that we were really meant to eat the Korban Pesach, and the Korban Pesach would bring simcha, there are Rishonim that say that there has to be simcha here as well. So simcha is also an important component. At the same time, it is serious. One of the reasons, perhaps, as they say, that we wear a kittel. It's a serious night. When do we wear a kittel? We wear a kittel on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, under the chuppah, and La'achamei V'Estrim. So whenever a Jew gets out the kittel, there's some serious stuff going on. It is serious. At the same time, it's incredibly uplifting. It's an opportunity. What is the opportunity? The opportunity is Zman Cheruseinu, that if we engage in the mitzvahs halayla properly, then just as when the Rebbeinu Shalom took us out, remember when he took us out from Mitzrayim, we were not zoicha. We didn't deserve to come out. We're going to say in the Haggadah, the pasuk from Yechezkel, you were naked, meaning you didn't have mitzvahs. You made an effort, a little bit of an effort, Dam Pesach and Dam Mila, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out, but it was still an absolute chesed. Pesach is keneged Avraham, says the Tur. It's midas chesed. Unlike what we're going to do and what we did exactly 6 months before, 6 months after, Tesvav, the 15th of Tishri, there is Din. The month of Tishri is about Din. This is a month of Chesed. But in order, the Sfas Emes always used to say, in order to get Chesed, you have to be Zoiche to Chesed. You have to merit Chesed, if that isn't a paradox. There is something that we need to do, and to the extent that we do the Avodah and do it properly, with this balance of both Simcha and Yira, then the Rebbeinu Shalom, as I'm going to read out from the Zohar Kiddush right now, amazing things happen in Shamayim. It's an incredible, incredible night. Let me read you the Zohar. Says the Zohar, I'll just start off and say, Ubahahu sipur chodi bechedva. If a Jew says the Haggadah and does so besimcha, and the cause for simcha, the Zohar Kiddush identifies two things. One is shvacha demorei, the praise of the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's a shevach. There is a shir. The Hallel that we say on this night is a different sort of Hallel for many reasons. But one of the reasons is because it is not a Hallel as a Hallel, but a Hallel as a shira, as a song, a shir yi elachem kaleil hiskadish chag, as the Novi says. It has dinim of a shira. So if anybody manages to feel the simcha, what's the simcha? That we are praising the Rabbeinu Shalom. And the Zohar goes on to say 4 times a very deep idea that when we are happy, b'purkona d'marehain, the liberation, the exodus of the Rabbeinu Shalom, that is a cause for simcha. You know, we focus heavily, of course, we think about ourselves, and we're meant to. If we didn't exit, we say in the Haggadah, if we didn't go out then, we would still be Meshubodim, with Paroi, but there was something else going on. And it's not something totally separate. If you heard my other shir on Emunah, you'll hear another layer of depth here as well. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yaakov, as a promise, as part of the promise, that we would definitely exit the Golus of Mitzrayim, he said, because Anochi Ereid Imcha Mitzrayim, I'm going to be there with you. The Shechina HaKdosha was also in Mitzrayim. What does that mean? I'm no Kabbalist, but I'll tell you what I think what it means. The Shechina is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is seen and perceived in the world. Lahavdil, his ratings. How is he seen? Is he seen in the world? Or is he chas v'shalom denied? Is he perceived? We are his agents. Says the Rabbeinu Shalom to Yaakov, Anochi eredim Mitzrayim. I will go down with you to Egypt because if you're in Egypt, I'm in Egypt. Because you are my agent. The only way that there will ever be Gilui Kvod Shamayim, the revelation of the Kovod, the existence of Hashem and his Kovod in the world, only comes about through us. Nobody else can do it, and therefore we knew we had to get out. Because if Hashem is with us, he can't stay there forever. Because the world has a purpose, and it must arrive at that destination, at the purpose. And therefore, Va'anochi a'alcha gam oloi, I will take you out, and I will come out with you. What does that mean? Hashem came out with us. It means because on this night of Leil Tesvav, Mitzrayim knew, the world knew. Ki ani Hashem bekerev haaretz, that I exist, that I'm the boss, that I'm in charge, and that this is my nation. They are my agents, my ambassadors, and through them, I'm going to give them the Torah, and they are going to walk with me through history until that final day by Yemahuye Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. So there is simcha in Shomayim, the Malachim, or besimcha, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is getting out of Mitzrayim with us. It's not a separate thing, because we are the ones that, when we liberate ourselves, the depth is when there is a geula, when there is an inner geula, and we find and acknowledge the elokus, the neshama that we have within us. That is Hashem being liberated within us, and from there it shines to the world. That was the whole purpose of it. And if we are able, as we go through the avodah of the Seder, if we are able to remember not just our own plight, but to be chodi b'purkona d'marehain, to think also about kvod shamayim, to think about the fact that Anochi a'alcha gam oloi, the Rabbeinu Shalom, as it were, the Shechina Kedosha came out with us. Now he can be misgala in the world. And if you can share his Yeshua, listen to what the Zera Kodesh says. And I'm just setting the scene. I've taken 10 minutes to say it. I'm getting carried away, but it's really, really important. Listen to this. Hahu barnashta chodu bechedva demore. At that moment in time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gathers around him all the billions of Srofim and Oifanim and Chayes HaKodesh and all the Malachim you can imagine. And he says, Zilu Shmiu, go, listen. Sipura de Shvocha Deli. Look at the fact that my children, throughout the world, wherever they are, in lockdown, in wherever they are singing my praises, Shvachadili, v'chado'on b'purkoni, and they are happy with my salvation. Then all the malachim get together with Klal Yisrael, and they listen. And then they come back and they report to the Ribbono Shel Olam, and listen to what the Ribbono Shel Olam says. The Ribbono Shel Olam says as follows. He says, somebody, I've lost the place here. He says, somebody who does this, Zamin, he is invited. If this happens, if you and I, in a week's time, manage, when we go through the avodah of the Seder, manage to think about the Ribbono Shel Olam as well, the Shechina, and that becomes a source of praise for him and simcha for his Yeshua, you get an invitation. Zamin lechado'o b'malka ba'alma da'osi. You get a special invitation to sit and be besimcha and oineg and nachas with the Ribbono Shel Olam in Olam Haba. That's an opportunity indeed. And that's only one tiny bit. I just really wanted to set the scene. Okay, let's move right on. Let's start delving into the halachos and do so in order. I've already, we've distributed, I've given a shir. You know that you can't do any malacha, of course, before Nacht. It's Shabbos, this you can't do. Well, if it was Erev Yom Tov, of course you could. Now, this means that there are a couple of things. I'm not going to go over all of them. They're in the booklet. We've discussed them. There are things you need to do on Friday, because there are things that you can't do on Shabbos. For example, I'll just give you one example. Preparing the salt water. There are slightly different halachas between Shabbos and Yom Tov, but still there's a bunch of things you need to make sure you do on Friday. One thing, again, I would advise, check your matzahs. Check your matzahs for a bunch of reasons. Number one, you need to make sure that you have enough. If you don't open them, the hand-baked matzahs, right, they're fragile. Sometimes they break. Shavir, they're fragile. So if you open them up and you don't have enough, you're in trouble. You might be in trouble, okay? So check beforehand you have enough. Now, you're not just checking beforehand you have enough, you need enough shleimos. You need to have a sholem. Now, what is a sholem? We need these funny shaped, irregular shaped, hand-baked matzahs. So up to around 2%, up to 1/48th in halach is still considered a sholem. Okay? So if it's got a crack in the middle, that doesn't matter at all. They often do. They often do have cracks. But if round the edges it's all sholem, then that's fine. Anything up to 2%, 1/48th, is still considered sholem. Let me give you a practical tip, which I learned from one of my sons-in-law. And that is a good idea. Often the matzahs, as they come, they sometimes, remember, they've been baked months ago. They've been baked a long time ago. And sometimes they can become just a little bit, not necessarily moldy, but they can be soggy. And it's much easier to eat them when they are nice and crisp and hard. Put them in the oven, Pesach oven, obviously, on Friday. Put them in the oven on quite a high heat for 10 to 15 minutes. Certainly not more than that. Keep an eye on them. It will take away the moisture. It'll make them crisp and beautiful to eat. Furthermore, if you have a bit which has broken off and it's more than 2%, you should probably phone me, because it might be possible to brown off the edges and make it sholem once again. Okay, but that's not the only thing you need to check for. There are a couple of other issues in halacha. I'm going to skim over them. I just want to make you aware of them, because according to many of the poskim, because of the way we produce our matzahs nowadays, it is done in a hotter oven than it was done in the time of the Ramah, and the thickness is somewhat different. And it is rare, but it can happen that your matzahs are actually chometz. It's unlikely. There is a concept of kfulos and nefuchos. It is possible for the matzah to be doubled over, right? And you need to know, basically ask a shaila, right? It's quite rare that it would be proper chometz, quite rare, but it can happen. You have to know whether it's properly stuck together. Can the air get in between? And then the other thing is nefuchos, when they are swollen. Now, it is normal with the hand-baked matzahs that they have these bubbles. So if it's a smallish bubble, doesn't matter. It's unlikely to be a problem. If it's an unusually large one, then again, you have to call me up and ask a shaila. It is possible that this is a siman that what is inside didn't get baked properly, and potentially might be chametz. Again, it's unlikely to be proper chametz, and the worst you'd have to do, probably, according to most poskim, would be to cut it off, maybe a little bit more, a kedei natila, and put it away. But again, for all these reasons, it's a good idea. Check your matzahs on Friday, in well ahead of time. Let's go back to the Leila Seder. Okay, you can't do any hachana before it's Shabbos, right? As soon as it is Nacht, and this is more relevant probably for the women because the men will be at home. The men will be in shul, hopefully. The women say, Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh leKodesh, and from then on you can do Melacha. The first thing you need to do, really, is you should light. Okay, now, Hadlokas HaNeiros on Yom Tov is a little bit different to Shabbos, and although there's a lot of Torah around this, the famous piece from the wife of the Prisha, but the halacha is as follows. I'll just give you the basic halacha. And I am aware that there are other opinions, but this is the best thing to do. Okay, so you cannot create fire on Yom Tov. You can't be moiled eish on Yom Tov. You can, however, you can't strike a match, but you can take a match from another flame. Right, from another flame you can take it. So unlike Shabbos, on Yom Tov you say the bracha lahadlik, then light it, and then say shehechiyanu. Okay, 3 stages. You make the bracha lahadlik, then light, and then say shehechiyanu. I am aware that there is a huge range of opinions about the shehechiyanu. It's a famous controversy, but not the time for a shia now. The minhag ha'olam is that women say shehechiyanu then, and you are still allowed, and according to some obligated, to still say amen to the shehechiyanu in the Kiddush, and it's not a hefsek. Okay, I hope that's clear. Right. Now, let's move on to the Ka'ara. So I just want to make you aware that there are 3 main opinions as to how the items on the Seder plate are arranged. The Aruch HaShulchan says to us that the minhag ha'olam is to do it like the Arizal, like the Ari HaKodesh, but there are other ways of doing it. I'm not sure whether it is in the booklet. It's a double segel, all the different bits. But if you don't have it, we'll send it through. That is the way that you organize the Ka'ara. Interesting story I came across that the Stipler was once at probably more than once, but he was at the Seder of his brother-in-law, the Chazon Ish, and he turned to the Chazon Ish and he said, how do you want the Ka'ara? Like the Ramah, like the Vilna Gaon, like the Arizal? And the Chazon Ish said to him one word, Kirtzoincha, however you want. Go figure. That's what he said. Right. Now, the mitzvahs halayla. Let's first be aware that we are going to do a number of, all the mitzvahs are important, but this is a night that is full of mitzvahs. In fact, it is a manishtano halayla hazeh, in the fact that it is, although it's a layla, but it is referred to as a yom. Because we very rarely, never, in fact, do we have such a night that is jam-packed with mitzvahs. But let's quickly go through what those mitzvahs are, then we'll drill down into the details and begin to go through the process, the Haggadah. So fundamentally, there are 2 mitzvahs which are min haTorah, 2 mitzvahs which are mid'oraisa, and they are eating matzah and the Haggadah. Those are the 2 mitzvahs which are min haTorah. Now, it is important that you know which ones are min haTorah and which ones are midrabanan, because when we come to deal with challenges, perhaps, or different opinions, then the ones we're going to be really machmir on, strict on, are going to be those which are min haTorah. So matzah and the Haggadah. Fascinating to note. Oh, you're all on mute. Okay, so I'll tell you. What is unique about this? Think about it. Matzah is the only time in the year that we have a mitzvah min haTorah to eat something. Min haTorah. The only eating you will ever do in the year that is min haTorah. That is incumbent on everybody to do. So only eating. And Haggadah is so we ingest, we take into our mouth. The only time in the year we eat something where the eating itself, what we are eating itself, is min haTorah, is midoraisa, but also the Haggadah. We express through our mouths, both of those things are min haTorah. One to ingest, one to And we'll if time permits, we'll talk about the order. Now, note to everybody, and this is a really, really important. In this night, women and men are exactly the same in their chiyuv. And therefore, it's really important, the poskim say, that women need to know. Of course, they may well be busy with lots of different things, but your obligation, the obligation of women on this night, is exactly the same chiyuv as men. And therefore, things need to be arranged in such a way that you can perform the mitzvahs properly. And it can have halachic ramifications. For example, even with the dalad kosos, you have to drink them shosan al haseder. You have to drink them in a particular order. And if you miss out, if you don't say the Haggadah, and because you're busy with it, and then you come and quickly have the second cup, and you haven't said the Haggadah, that's no good either. So, as much as is possible, and everybody has to help. But the obligation for the mitzvahs are exactly the same. So the two mitzvahs in our Torah are, of course, eating matzah and Haggadah. Midrabanon, we have 3 or possibly 4, depending on how you say it. The 4 kosos, dalad kosos, moror, and halel, possibly also. Okay, so let's try and do this in Seder. As a Seder, okay? So we've done Halachos Aneris. You come home, you've got the table is laid, and you need to really try and start as soon as possible. That's quite important because there's a lot to do, a lot to get through. Okay, so the first thing that you come across really so we're going to do it in order, is the dalad kosos. Okay, this is midrabanon. You have to have 4 cups of wine. So let's look at 3 things initially to start with. And before I do all of this, I am aware that there are many, many different opinions on many of these different things. And I'm going to enumerate some of them. If anybody has difficulty with anything of what I've said, approach me afterwards privately, and we can see where accommodation can be made. Okay, so you have to drink 4 cups of wine. First question, the size of the cup. Second question is, what do you put in the cup? And the third question is, how much do you have to drink? How much of that cup do you have to drink? Okay, so the first thing to answer, the first question is actually relatively easy to answer. How much the cup has to hold a revius? Now, how much is a revius? So here we have a bunch of different opinions, ranging from the Chazon Ish, which is 150 milliliters. That's the biggest shear, okay? All the way down to Reb Chaim Noah, who says that it was 86 milliliters, okay? And then you have all sorts of in between. So you have, for example, and I don't want to complicate it too much, but there are 2 different ways as to how we compute a revius. And there's a big argument as to whether we use the bigger or the smaller shear. And the Mishnah Berurah paskins that, generally speaking, whenever we are talking about a d'oraisa, something which is min haTorah, we will be machmir for the larger shear. We'll come to that later. And anything which is midrabanon, we can take the smaller shear. So, for example, I'll give you some of these opinions in between. According to Moshe Feinstein, for example, you have his larger shear for min haTorah would be 130.7 milliliters, whereas the small shear would be 97.6. The Kiddush cup that the Chofetz Chaim used, and I know there is controversy around this. There's stories about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's Kiddush cup, but Uvda, Ma'aser Rav, Chofetz Chaim's Kiddush cup held 119 milliliters, whereas 148. Sorry, 148. The Chofetz Chaim's Kiddush cup held 148, and Rabbi Yisrael Salanter's held 121.2 milliliters. The Chofetz Chaim, by the way, paskins that for Arba kosos, it seems like you should have 119. Okay, so this is not actually that much. So here, anybody want to guess how much this is? I'll tell you. This is the biggest shear. This is 150 milliliters. That is just the size of the cup. That is the biggest shear that exists. Okay, that's the most machmir, the shit of the Chazon Ish. That's 150 milliliters. Your cup only needs to hold that. And in fact, as I'm going to explain to you shortly, because of when we talk about how much you need to drink, there is an advantage in having a smaller cup. And I'll explain. I'll explain how and why that is shortly. Okay, so we've spoken about the size of the Kiddush cup. Now, what do you put in it? Again, here there's a lot of Torah. I would say as follows: it is definitely preferable to have yayin hamashaka. There should be some alcoholic content in. If you can take 4 cups of wine, then absolutely there is an advantage. All the poskim would agree, even Reb Shlomo Zalman, who was quite happy with grape juice, but the poskim would agree, based on the Rashbam and the Gemara Yidei Yayin Yotza, that it should be alcoholic. Again, part of Cherus. Why are we drinking 4 cups of wine? Right? Who drinks 4 cups of wine on an evening? Right? It's all part of showing the Cherus, and therefore it is certainly done in a more enhanced way with alcoholic content. So if you can't take 4 whole cups of wine, then you may have grape juice, but put some wine into it. L'chatchila, ideally, it should be red wine. Ideally, that is mentioned. Interesting historical note: the Taz writes that they stopped at one point in history having red wine because of the blood libels, but Baruch Hashem, we can and therefore should have red wine. Now, don't dilute. I just want to add one thing, and that is, if anybody has difficulty even with grape juice, do not dilute the grape juice that we get nowadays, because you could be in very difficult situation halachically, because a lot of it is already quite diluted. So preference, have wine. If you can take 4 cups of wine, have wine. And if you can, then I would actually suggest that you have a nice wine. It's meant to be a wine that you enjoy. It is derech cherus. Have a proper 4 cups of wine if you can take it. If you can't take, and I'll come to this in a second, if you would be able to have 4 cups of wine, but not if you're having a big shiur, then get a smaller cup. I'll explain about that in a second. Now, how much of the cup do you need to drink? Again, ideally, you should drink the entire cup if you can. If you can't, you should drink roiv revius, or roiv of the cup. And therefore, there is an advantage in having, if it's going to be difficult to have a 150 mil, right? You're going to, let's say you want to have a cup of the Chazon Ish, but that means you're not going to be able to drink wine, and instead you're going to have grape juice. It is probably better not to have the 150 mil, because remember, this is what I mentioned before. We're talking about a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, so you don't need to be machmir for the biggest shiur. You don't have to. It's absolutely okay to have a cup. Say, you could have the Chafetz Chaim, you could have 119 milliliters. That's nothing. It's not a lot. Really, it's not a lot. According to Moshe Feinstein, you have 97.6. So it really is nothing. It's very, very little. It is better to get a smaller kos and drink the entire kos of wine, rather than having some big cup, and then because of that you can't have wine, and you don't drink. Maybe you only drink a little bit of the cup. You have to drink. You really should be drinking roiv, the majority of the cup. Ideally, if you can, the best way to do it, I would suggest as follows: don't get a massive cup. Get a cup, I don't know, 120 milliliters, something like that, and see if you can take wine, fill it with wine, and drink the whole thing. And that would definitely be the best way to do it. Another important point is that it has to be done kedei achilas pras. You have to do kedei shtia. You can't have a sip and then have a schmooze, or you really need to drink it all straight. Whatever you're going to drink it straight away. No delays. Okay, that's important. And then, of course, heseba, to lean, which is one really one needs to give an entire share on how to lean and how to do it properly. But the idea is you don't need to lean at some crazy angle. If you have, by the way, if you have a sofa, if you have the space and you're able to have a couch and lean out on a couch, then that's amazing. That would be derech cherus, the way of showing that you're free. But to unnaturally be, you need to be comfortable. All the poskim say you've got to be comfortable. To be at some awkward, unnatural angle that's not a saber, that's being uncomfortable. So your head and your torso should be inclined. You should really have, if you can, korim exosis, you should have cushions, and you can lean, make sure that you're comfortable, but your body and your head is inclined to the left, and that is Haseba. Okay, one more comment. Kiddush b'mokum su'uda. Here's an interesting one. We know that we always have to have Kiddush b'mokum su'uda, and yet what are we going to do? We're going to have Kiddush on Seder night, and then we're lucky, get a little bit of whatever it is that you have, celery or potato, whatever it is for karpas, and then who knows when you're going to eat. What happened to Kiddush b'mokum su'uda? So there's, cut a long story short, there are two main approaches to this. Either the karpas at some sort of b'diavad level qualifies as a suda. David Feinstein, Zechon Livracha, talks about this, or Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zechon Livracha, suggests a fascinating thing. He says that the suda tonight, Chazal were koveya. Chazal instituted that this is how Jews eat on Seder night. This is our suda. There's a break because we have a Haggadah, but it's all nichlal, it's all included in the suda, and therefore that's how we satisfy that requirement. Important to mention, let's go through Kaddish, right? So before you say Kiddush, now different minhagim, whether one person says the Kiddush and is mitzi everybody, or everybody says their own Kiddush. There are different minhagim about that, and whatever one's minhag is, have kavanah to be yaitza. And for Ashkenazim, it's a bit more complicated because we say a hagofen on every cup. So have in mind that you're fulfilling this hagofen is only going on this cup. Okay. Now, being Matza Shabbos, we have a slightly different Kiddush, don't we? We have Yak Nahaz. I remember as a child finding it very humorous, but that's how we remembered it. Yak Nahaz, the Gemara says, Yayin, Kiddush, Neir, Havdalah, Zman. That's how we make, that is what is different about the Kiddush on Mitzvah Shabbos, because it is Kiddush, but it is also Havdalah. Hamavdil ben Kodesh leKodesh. So Yayin, Hagofen. The minhag, by the way, generally is not to stand for this Kiddush. Other people may have a different minhag. Yayin. Then we say Kiddush. Now, Ner. Remember, you can't create a light on Yom Tov. And here actually there is a machlokas haposkim. It's actually a machlokas between Rabbi Elyashiv and Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. Which way is better? So you can probably pick either way. We normally are makbid on Mitzvah Shabbos to have two candles and avuka, two candles that go together. For various halachic considerations, it's not at all clear whether we should be doing this as well. And one thing I will say is, perhaps the best way to do it, which will avoid the argument between the poskim, is to take it could be two matches, or if it is two candles, to put them close together so that the flames unite, but the actual candles and the wicks do not. And if you can do that, that would be the easiest way to do it, to avoid any other complications. That's Ner, and then Havdalah. You make the brach of Hamavdil ben Kodesh leKodesh, as is printed in the Seder, and then Zman Shehechionu, and have in mind when you say the Shehechionu for all the mitzvahs halayla that you're going to do. Okay, Kaddish, Urachatz. Let's move on. Urachatz. We wash our hands. Now, why do we wash our hands? Well, that's the reason, isn't it? So that we asked, why are we washing our hands? Just a second. What's my place here? Sorry, where did I put it? Okay, so the two main reasons are given in the Rishonim. Here we go. Two main reasons are given in the Rishonim, but essentially we want to provoke questioning. So the halacha really is that when we're about to dip something in. So me'ika hadin, something something that you eat dipping in, should you wash your hands? Now, some people are not makbid to do this in the year. Really, we should, but we do it now, and we davka do it now, and that way we provoke questions. That's one of the opinions in the Rishonim, and that's probably good enough for us. Just bear with me a second. Here we go. Okay, fine. Now, so we wash our hands. Now, this actually can create a problem. Here's an interesting halachic problem for you. If you, after you washed your hands, and your hands are now clean, unless you are aware that your hands have become dirty, then according to a number of poskim, this creates potentially a problem with washing our hands before the meal and then saying a bracha of al natilas yadayim, because we washed our hands. Okay, maybe it was an hour and a half ago, and therefore there are two approaches in the poskim why this, how we can make a bracha later for al natilas yadayim, even though we have washed our hands already. And some poskim say what you should actually do is deliberately, dirty your hands, scratch your head or whatever it is, so that you then know that your hands are now dirty, and you definitely need to do the bracha of natilas yadayim before Hamotzi. Okay, that is mentioned. Okay, that's urchatz. Then we come to karpas. Now, what do we have? Again, why do we eat karpas? We eat karpas again to dip something in to make it different. Now, what exactly is the difference? So again, here the Rishonim say, according to the Rashbam, it's the fact that we're dipping in before the Seudah. That's what arouses the questioning. And according to others, the Tosfos, it's because we'll be dipping in twice, and either way, that will arouse curiosity. And now, what do you take for karpas? Well, there are a number of different opinions. I'll just go through some of them. The truth is, me'ikah din, you can have any vegetable you like. You have less than a kazayis, you dip it in the salt water, say beri priyadama. You have in mind, technically for the morrow or for later. The Chasam Sofer says, very interesting, he says he did a lot of research, and he says it is celery. Very clearly it is celery. Yeah, he says definitely celery. Interestingly, I came across this just left of field. I've never seen this before. That the Gerer Rebbe, but 2 or 3 Gerer Rebbes before the Beis Yisrael, he would have strawberries for karpas, and the reason he did it was because it's weird, and that was the reason he did it. He says that's the whole point. The point is to arouse wonderment. So you'd have tut sadeh, or sometimes ananas. You would have pineapple. Okay, fine. We eat less than a kazayas, so that there's no question of a brocha achroina, and then magid. Now, here we start with the second mitzvah. I don't know how we're going to get all this in tonight. Okay, here we start with the second mitzvah d'oraisa. Well, we haven't done Matza yet, but this really has to be a focal point. This is a mitzvah min haTorah, which is, as I've said before, incumbent on everybody, men and women alike. What is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is lesaper, to tell the story. Let me say the famous idea from Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who asked the obvious question. Jewish males over the age of 13 have a mitzvah min haTorah in the morning and in the evening to remember Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim, to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim. So, and in fact, in Ma'ariv on Seder night, we will have done that already. So what are we doing now that we haven't already done? And he answers that there are 3 fundamental differences. One is what we talk about. One is how we talk about it. And one is that we incorporate halachos as well. Let me explain. Let's go through this. So on a regular evening, what do we say? We say one pasuk. Anochi Hashem Elokeichem asher tzeitzei eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Hashem who took you out from Egypt. V'zeu. Finished. It's a statement. I am Hashem who took you out from Mitzrayim. If anybody listened to my other shir, the shir on Emunah, you will notice that the Rambam uses twice. The Rambam, we pointed out, the Rambam, although of course we do have to talk about Yitzias Mitzrayim, but the Rambam says the mitzvah says lesaper nisim v'niflois shena selonu b'Mitzrayim. He says the focus is that we have to talk about the nisim that happened to us in Mitzrayim. In Shema, we talk about the coming out. Here, we have to explain the derech sha'ila u'tshuva in a very specific pedagogic way, in a way of asking and answering. But we have to be maschil bignus u'masayim b'shevach. We have to go through the whole story. You can't just do what we do every night in Mariv and just take one tiny little sentence and say, I am Hashem who took you out from Egypt. That's Zechiras Yitzias Mitzrayim. This is something else. This is Higadato. This is Sipur. And therefore, you've got to tell the whole story. Once upon a time, Arami Oved Ovi, and you've got to go through the whole thing and do it in a very particular way. Derech Shaila Utshuva. That's one point. And we have to also talk about the Ta'amei HaMitzvos. We have to talk about the mitzvahs that are obligated as a result of this, that are connected to this. We're going to say later, Rabban Gamliel, if you don't say those three things, you're not yotzer your obligation. My big machlokes rishonim, which obligation are you not yotzer? According to some, it means that if you eat matzah and you do not explain why you're eating matzah, then it is a problem in the fulfillment of the mitzvah of matzah. Many other rishonim say no. It's nothing to do with the individual mitzvah. This is all part of the Haggadah, the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. And I'll just throw in a quick comment, because I see we're not really going to get to do any or much Haggadah at all. And that is, every journey has to have a destination. There has to be a yi'ud, a tachana, a terminus. Where am I going? The emunah that we build up, that we reconnect to on this night, has to take me to a place of avdus. Kervonu hamokem liyichudai, the Rambam says, or kervonu hamokem la'avoidosai. We were avdei paroi, and now hallelu avdei Hashem. And therefore we demonstrate that through performing mitzvahs. We now have to listen to the Rabbeinu Shalom. We acknowledge, in fact, the word Haggadah itself, some of the Rishonim say, Higadati hayom la'Hashem Elokecha, is v'shabochis v'oidois. It is to be moida, to acknowledge, to accept. We have on Pesach night also to submit ourselves to the Borei Olam. That's the journey. Matza zu shanu eichlin. Where does this take us? This takes us to becoming Avdei Hashem, and then we can go on the journey to Matan Torah, Ta'avdun es Elokim ala horazeh. Okay, so this is the journey which Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim takes us through. We have to do this in a way which is meaningful, which is relevant for the audience, for the target audience, and the key to, like anything else, the key is preparation. If you have young children, or even if you have older children, one has to v'higadata levincha. There's a machlokes, it seems that in the Rishonim, how they used to do it. According to some Rishonim, one person only would read the Haggadah and everybody else would listen. A sort of a shomeya ka'oina. When you listen to something, it is as if you said it. But other Rishonim say, no, you actually, even though it says v'higadata levincha, you actually have to say it yourself. A minhag that our minhag and what many other people do, is that even if one person is leading, and you can of course give people different turns to lead, but everybody else says it sotto voce, so you say it under your breath, so that you're also saying it as well. And today, Baruch Hashem, there is so much material, midrashim translated, and we need to know, like I said in the other share, that this is we do it through Torah. That's how we do it. That's how you arrive at emunah. Kol hamarich bidrash parsha zu harizim meshubach, says the Rambam. Anybody who elaborates on the understanding of the psukim of the Torah that tells us, it's not just because there were nice nisim v'niflos, it's the Torah, and the more and deeper we understand it, the better. That's why, for example, for the Chacham, it's the Halachos. Ein maftirin afat ha'emor loi. He wants to know what this is all about, and you tell him, and then you also have to tell him the halachas. And in fact, you need to keep learning the halachas the whole night. We'll talk about that later. Okay, let's move on. So the Zohar was here. Okay, it was in a different place. Fine. So we work our way through the Haggadah, and again, just a reminder, say this again, that women also need to make sure to say the Haggadah as much as they possibly can. And this is this is the other mitzvah, which is absolutely is min haTorah. It's the central piece through which we acquire the emunah that we're going to need for the rest of the year. Okay, let's move on. Where does the Haggadah take us? Then we do a strange thing. What do? We work our way through the drosha of all the psukim. And again, if one doesn't prepare those droshas, then just saying them doesn't really do the trick. You really have to spend a little bit of time going through them. But where does it take us? It takes us to a point after we've said Rabban Gamliel, we go through the whole thing. Then it takes us to a point, lefichach. Therefore, anachnu chayovim lahoidos ulahalel l'shabeach. We have to acknowledge, where have we gone on this journey? And we need as much as we can. And this is the simcha. We have to be able to, not in some superficial, just emotional way, but when one learns Torah and one learns it properly, it's the language of your neshama. And when you go through that, you should hopefully feel as much as we possibly can what all of this means, and that how our whole history, our whole journey, it's 3,333 years this year since Yetzias Mitzrayim. An unbroken chain of Haggadahs, of Seder nights. It's an incredible thing. Just stop and think and be mizbeinen, and through the Haggadah, it needs to transport you. It needs to transport you to thinking about Mitzrayim, of exiting your own Meitzar Yam, your own self-imposed Meitzarim, because on this, like Hashem on that night, took us out, Lecherus Oilam, says Rav Hutner, we are given the opportunity once again, even if through the rest of the year we've somehow become imprisoned and trapped in our own limitations, our own world, and our horizons have been narrowed, and we think we can't achieve, and we feel Seder is the night when the Ribbono Shel Olam says, do my mitzvahs, mean it, put our effort and avodah into it, and I will take you out tonight. Again, once again, Cherus Olam, you'll be liberated. You will be free again to be able to be who you really need to be. If that doesn't give somebody simcha, then how can that not give somebody simcha? And therefore, where does it take us to? Lahoidos, lahalel, shabeach, and we begin to sing. But it's very interesting. What do? We start off and we say the first bits of Hallel, what the Gemara calls Hallel Mitzra'ah, the Hallel of Mitzrayim. We say just a little bit. We're just getting going. You'd think we'd go right in through the whole Hallel. We don't, of course. We stop, and then Rochza. In the other shir, I discussed why we split it. Rochza. So we wash our hands. I've mentioned before about it was a Pri Megadim, actually. The Pri Megadim says very strongly. He says pshita. He says it is obvious. He says that if somebody wasn't mesiach das, and he didn't get sidetracked, and he didn't touch anywhere dirty, he says it is osur to say al netilas when we wash, and therefore we should. Really, ideally, you should, like I said, you should try and dirty your hands, and then you definitely can make the bracha. Now, here is where we come to Matza. This is the other mitzvah min haTorah. So the first thing we need to do is we need to know, what is Matza? What is Matza? So there are actually 5 conditions that need to be satisfied for something to be Matza. It has to be made of one of the Chamesh Saminim. It has to have been baked, not fried, not boiled, at all. It has to be baked exclusively with water. Obviously, it has to be done in a way that it doesn't come lidei chimutz, and it needs to be shmura lishma. It has to be made with a dough. It has to be lechem oini, right? And it needs to be ushmartem es hamatzos. You have to have shmura matzah for the Seder. You cannot have anything other If you have anything other than shmura matzah for the Seder, you're simply not yetzer. There is no room for negotiation. There's no b'di'evet. There's no matzah ashira. Well, Ashkenazim don't eat matzah ashira on Pesach anyway at all, but it has to be matzah shmura. Now, time does not permit now, but you should be aware that the way that flour is produced nowadays is highly sophisticated. It is tempered. It is bleached. It has to be harvested. It has to be a certain type of flour, a certain type of grain. The point at which it is harvested, if it is harvested too late and the rains get to it, it's also problematic. And it's a very sophisticated thing. And a lot of effort goes into it. Really, production of matzah is a year-round effort. That's the emes. If you speak to people who know about this, whether it comes from Canada or wherever it comes from, the mashgichim go into the fields not long after Pesach. Not that long. They're sent out to start checking the types of wheat. They only use certain types of wheat, and then how they are stored, dry conditions. It's a massive chokhmah. You really need to know what you're doing. Therefore, it's very important that you buy matzah. Obviously, you have to buy matzah, which is shmura. Now, I'll just say a quick word about the machine versus hand-baked controversy. I would say as follows. If you do not have any minhag otherwise, then you should have hand-baked matzahs, but make sure that you buy them from a reputable firm, a firm that knows what they're doing, with a good hechsher, obviously, because they're technically, at some level, it might be easier to go wrong with hand-baked matzahs if you don't know how to bake and you don't know exactly what you're doing and doing properly. Just taking a bunch of bochrim just to go into a chabur and make matzahs. If you don't know what you're doing, if you're not with experts and professionals, like anything else in life, if you don't know what you're doing, then you'll probably end up with chametz. So you have to have shmura hand-baked matzahs. You have to have shmura matzahs. I would say preferably hand-baked, although there are some, I did know the Gates of Rosh Hashiva and others, the Rocha, that would davka not have hand-baked, only have machine, but that is the exception rather than the rule. Okay. I had Shaila this year about, again, as always, about gluten-free and all this sort of stuff. And that's, this is a mitzvah min HaTorah. So somebody who's, it causes an upset stomach. It's not life-threatening. So I said to them, you have to have a kazayas of matzah. And if it gives you a bit of an upset stomach, I'm really sorry, and you can spend the rest of the day in bed. But this is the mitzvah. Obviously we're not talking about something where there's even any doubt of it being pikuach nefesh or anything like that. But this is the mitzvah min HaTorah, and you have to have it. So maybe we could be lenient to say not to do the others midrabanon. Depends on how strong the chayli is, but this has to be the case. Now, how much? Here again, the fun starts. How much is a kazayas? So let's. Where are my notes of this? Now, it's the problem with some of the testimonies that we have from the Chazon Ish and others is that over the years, the size and weight of the matzahs have altered a bit. Okay, so for example, let's assume that you're going to be having hand-baked matzahs. So I'll just read through my notes on this. So the Steipler quoted the Chazon Ish, who measured it as half a machine matzah is a kazayas. The Steipler says that he remeasured it 25 years later, and it was 2/3 of a machine matzah. Okay. Now the way it works is as follows: matzah is approximately half the density of water, so one cc of matzah is about half a gram. So a kazayas would be about 25 grams. A standard machine matzah weighs 35 to 40 grams. So 2/3 of a machine matzah is certainly enough. Hand-baked matzah weighs approximately double. So 1/3 of a hand-baked matzah is a kazayas, certainly for the durabonon, so for koirech or afikomen. But if you have a 1/3 of a hand-baked matzah, maybe a little bit more for the min HaTorah one, you are okay. All right. Now, we wash. And we have, now I'm holding 3 matzahs, okay? So I'm holding 3 matzahs because, and I realize now I missed out yachatz. Okay, that wasn't very good. So what you do is you hold up all 3, so you've got the 2 shlemos, the 2 which are whole on top and on bottom, and in the middle you've got the smaller half of the one that you broke before, because the larger half went for the afikomen, right? So you need to make lechem mishnah. It's Yom Tov. So what do? You have the 2 shlemos. You lift them all up. You say the first bracha if you are leading the Seder. You say Hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. Then you let go of the bottom whole matzah. So you're holding now the top whole matzah and a smaller bit of the second matzah, and then you make the bracha of al achilas matzah. Generally speaking, the minhag, by the way, is that we don't use salt for the Seder. I think Sephardim do, some other people do. Ashkenazim generally do not. Now, how much do you need to eat? And again, this is also a big story. And I would say as follows. The person that is leading the Seder needs to eat 2 kazesim. However, and I'm not going to, time has run out, so I'm not going to go into all the reasoning and the details. The person that is leading the Seder needs to eat 2 kazesim, one for achilas matzah and one for lechem mishnah. There's a bit of a machlokes which of those matzahs is which. What do? But you don't need to eat 2 kazesim of the larger shear, that's for sure. So you could have 2 kazesim of the smaller shear, not the larger shear, and that would certainly be enough. You take a little bit off the top and the second one. Everybody else, no doubt, you will have prepared beforehand, and they will have their own matzahs as well. Then they get a little bit of the top one and the second one. You hand it round to them, and then you lean and you eat 2 kazesim, assuming you're leading the Seder. They should be eaten. Now, toich kedei, here's where it gets a bit more complicated, because certainly the matzahs in those days were different. There's no question about it. And the various time frames that we are given for eating matzah range, for achilas pras, range from 2 to 9 minutes. Now, it is very, very difficult. By the way, the clock only starts ticking, according to many poskim, when it depends whether when you start chewing or when you start swallowing, but not from the moment you put it in, necessarily the moment you put it in your mouth. And therefore, really, you should, without being gross, you should try and put as much of the 2 kazesim in your mouth as is decent and possible. And then, leaning, eat them within 4 minutes would be ideal. If you can get them all in if you can eat them within 4 minutes, that would be great. Try not to talk or be mafsik with anything other than things that are necessary for the Seder until after Korach, because according to some, really we're doing the moror and then the Korach. Really, there should be no unnecessary chatter until after Korach. Okay, let's move on to moror. Now, what is moror? Again, that's the Mishnah lists a number of different things that are moror, and the choicest one of them appears to be lettuce. It seems to be lettuce, chasa. Again, lots of different opinions. Rabban Kotler said it doesn't have to be, everybody seems to have romaine lettuce. He says it doesn't have to be romaine lettuce. It could be any type of lettuce. Not everybody agreed that chasa would be, that lettuce is a good idea. And some people have chrein. And here it gets complicated because it needs to still be fresh and relatively fresh, not to be grated long before, because otherwise it loses its potency. What a lot of people do, and it's just a suggestion, is that you have the chasa, and some people have a bit of chrein with it as well. It's very important, of course, to check it for bugs, which really should be done. It can be problematic if it's done on Friday, but be careful, don't leave it in water. If you leave it in water from Friday till Matzah Shabbos, then it could be kovush, which basically disqualifies it for morrow. So you could put it in a bag and in the fridge, moist, to keep it fresh. You could even put it in the freezer theoretically, but make sure that it's checked beforehand. The Rabbi Akiva Eiger writes, was it Rabbi Akiva Eiger or the Chasam Sofer? I forget. One of them writes in Tshuva, he said it would be the most important thing is that you don't eat bugs. Obviously, the morah is midrabanon. Eating bugs is an issa min haTorah. So then you eat the morah without leaning, and then we come to kairach. Kairach, again, you have a kazayas of matzah, but here we can take the smaller shear of kazayas of matzah with charoses, and this is reminding us of what Hillel used to do. Kairach Pesach matzah morav eichlam b'yachad, and that's one proof, by the way, that the matzahs they had it was a lafa, it was a shawarma, it was a shawarma. It's as simple as that. That's what it was. It was a lafa with the lamb, with the korban Pesach, with the salad. Probably without the hummus, but that's what it was. So we know that the matzahs were pliable, they were thick. Some Sfardim know how to do it still today, and they still do it. If you know what you're doing, we don't eat it, but that's for them that is their matzah. And if they have a Masorah, then it's probably their Masorah is probably as good, if not better, than ours. Right, Kairach. Now Shulchan Aruch. If there's time here, you've got to clock watch a little bit. It is definitely preferable to make sure that you eat the afikomen before chatzos. That is definitely the best way of doing it. You will no doubt be aware that there is a concept, according to the Avnei Nezer, not everybody agrees with it or is happy with it, but the idea of possibly eating just before, just eating a kazayas of matzah just before chatzos and making a tanai and saying that if, depending on who the halacha is like, whether I have to eat it before chatzos, and if the halacha is that you can only eat it up until chatzos, then I can start eating again afterwards. If you're stuck, you can do that, but I think one should try to make sure that you eat the afikomen before chatzos. Now, the afikomen that you eat, it doesn't have to be the one that the kids have stolen, or that it can be, if you're running out of time, it doesn't have to be that one, right? It just has to be a kazayas of matzah. Again, everybody has to eat it. The women have to eat it as well. Leave some room. It has to be eaten al hasoiva. It's a zechav to the korban pesach. It has to be eaten with appetite. You have to want to eat it, so you've got to leave some room for it. Then we bench, and we have the. Then you bench, and you have, interesting, the third kos is the kos on Birchas Hamazon. Isn't that interesting? Think about what that means. That regular Birchas Hamazon, what makes it a special? Something to possibly to think about a little bit. And then we begin, it's interesting, what happens after we've started off the whole Seder, we've started off with intellectually, with working through the Torah of the Haggadah, and then we ingest, we eat the Matza, which the Zohar HaKadosh calls the Michla de Mehemenusa. Remember, again, the only eating min HaTorah of the year. The only time when I eat something, and this is exactly what Hashem wants me to eat, min HaTorah. So that the Kedusha that gives you, that it literally takes it into your blood. It's transformative. It's now a chelek of who you are. And then the rest of the night, and this is really important, in England, I'm sure the rest of the world as well, there's a very nice minhag. People stay up Shavuos night and they learn. It's a lovely, very nice minhag. How many people stay up Seder night? It's a halach in Shulchan Aruch. It's a Tosefta. You are chayev. There's no such thing as just finishing the Seder and going to bed. This is not some sort of chumrah. This is a halach in Shulchan Aruch. That chayev adam, you are obligated, la'asoik, to engage in the hilchos haPesach, shir hashirim, the shiros v'tishbachos, and shetach shino. When you nod off and you fall asleep, then you can get up and go to bed. Maybe, some people are machmer, they do it long before. But the idea is, this is a night like no other. This is a night full of opportunities for ruchnius, where we create the yesod, the foundation of all of the emunah that we're going to have and need for the rest of the year. It's an incredibly special night through being Mekayim the mitzvahs properly, besimcha, like we said, preparing, knowing what we are doing and going on that journey, starting from our head where we internalize and we learn and we understand deeper what it was like to be in Mitzrayim, what the Makkos were like. And then eating the Matza, eating the mitzvahs, and then being uplifted to sing and be besimcha together with the Rabbeinu Shalom. This is our meal ticket, as the Zohar that we started with this evening. This is our meal ticket. Zamin, then we are invited lemechadei, to be happy with the Rabbeinu Shalom Imitz Hashem in Olam Haba. This has just been a very, very basic overview of the Seder. I think probably next year we probably need to do a series. It was trying to bite off far too much. Obviously, there'll be lots of follow-up shilas. I hope this was of benefit. Thank you for joining me. Chag kosher v'sameach to those of you that I won't see. A freilich and yom tov. Thanks so much. Kol tuv. Good night. Bye-bye.